and good evening this morning, whatever it is, once again. Let me mangle that really, really badly. Welcome to The Other Side of Midnight, the program, the nightly program where we explore things that kind of seem cool and rational between dusk and dawn, and then in the cold light of day, maybe they might be viewed a little differently. Well, our job is to try to bridge that gap and to bring people from the night side to the day side. Now, I've got a couple things I want to get into first before we get to our guests of this morning and our discussion. I presume those of you tuning in actually watched the debate. Actually, both debates. There was the kids' table debate. Don't you love how media, big media, has taken control of the political process, and it was Fox dictating to candidates running for the highest office under the Constitution, basically slaves to a major media corporation in terms of who would show up, who would be rated, who would be at which debate, who would be in, who would be out, who would be top tier, who would be third tier, who would be... In other words, how this is presented to the American people. Well, we'll get into that in a few minutes, because I have some very interesting, I hope, at least they are to me, thoughts on what we saw tonight. And my two guests are equally unafraid to express strong opinions. And that phone is going to get killed someday. The thing I want to start with tonight is that there is a very, very extraordinary image that NASA has released. And this image, I'm actually going to kill this phone. All right, hold on one. Except I can't quite do that without reaching too far on the other side of the desk. So, I think I know who that is. Somehow they were able to get this private number, and obviously we may have to change the private number. So we're not going to have this every night. Moving on, NASA released an image which is so startling, so astonishing, so naked in its reality and confirmation of everything I have been talking about for 30 years. Let me repeat that. This image is the confirmation of everything I have been discussing in terms of extraterrestrial anomalies. Architecture, glass ruins, ancient civilizations, a Type 2 society stretching from Mercury all the way out now past Pluto. All those things are exquisitely demonstrated in this single NASA image. It's been released, I believe, as part of the larger creeping disclosure plan that we've been looking at for some time in terms of NASA's public affairs activities, posting astonishing data confirming the ruins, the artifacts, all the junk and machinery on Mars, all that, quietly on the websites, not talking about it, not commenting, just doing exactly what they said 3 years ago that they were going to do, which was to not make any comments or to react to those comments outside of NASA that those of us, those analysts such as ourselves might make from time to time. And they're proceeding exactly according to their announced game plan. The Curiosity Project scientists sat at a press conference in August of 2012 and said, "This is exactly what we're going to do. This is going to be our plan," and they're fulfilling the plan. Now, it is not the Curiosity mission which has given us this astonishing official image. It's a totally separate part of NASA. In fact, if I were to tell you even which object, which body, which planetary neighbor these images are of, it might give the game away, and I don't want certain sites taken down, so we'll just keep it at that tonight. One of the downsides of doing this program is that this image came in so late from a source that I was unable to prepare it or put it up on Enterprise or on the Other Side of Midnight, where you can all look at it. And it's totally unfair to talk about it in any detail without being able to look at it. Remember, this is radio with pictures. So tomorrow night or tomorrow morning, I've got to make a decision as to whether The Other Side of Midnight is night or morning. Be that as it may, tomorrow morning we will discuss this image in great detail, and we will show it, and we will then open the lines and we will take reaction. I have a guest scheduled that kind of fits in, and I'm going to talk with him privately as to how much time he wants to devote to this versus to all the other things we were planning to talk about. But see, that's the nature of this show. That's why, Art calls me like every night, not that call. And he says, well, what do you think? He's waiting for me to say I'm having fun yet. I'm not there because there's a lot to do. There's a lot of technology to monitor, and then there's the strange stuff that happens with people that think they're going to interrupt by calling on private lines. But again, be that as it may, the experience is getting better and better and better, and a large part of that is the input and the feedback from you guys. The email has been extraordinarily kind. You've had some very good suggestions for how we can improve the technical aspects of the show. I actually wasted an entire can of WD-40 on this chair, and do you hear anything? See? Progress. Okay, next item. This program is a really interesting experiment. I mean, we're on a medium, the digital global World Wide Web, that potentially has no limits in terms of audience. And it is categorically not limited to what we would call a symmetric audience, meaning everybody has to listen live, because with archives and recordings and digital media, you can access this program anytime, anywhere, on anything, including your wrist now, courtesy of Apple. And so we can be with you whenever you want us, or when you don't want us, you can turn us off and go do something else. That potential for having crystal clear, on-demand information on any particular topic, not just our show, but anything, is the hallmark now of the wired world that we only could imagine 50 years ago when Dick Pertell and I did that show with covering Mariner 4. By the way, I really appreciate your very warm accolades for Dick Pertell, my friend. I called him up and I read him some of the emails and sent them over, and he actually said that he is going to get up at the crack of dawn and do some more shows from D.C. His years at VOA and his years in broadcasting and his perspective, I think, would add a great deal to the show, and it's just a matter of the time frame doesn't quite fit certain lifestyles and certain life patterns. So that's where the archives come in. With the potential to reach so many people, it's really incumbent on us to realize that each one of us now, when you call in later on this morning, you literally could be talking live to anyone in the world. Someone in Hong Kong, someone in Tokyo, someone in Amsterdam, someone in New York, someone in Buenos Aires, someone in Moscow. Anyone in the world can be listening to you, and your thoughts and your ideas and your vision can get at the speed of light to people that you could never even have known exist in any previous generation. What Art and I are trying to do, and Keith, of course, is to create the next step in access to the things that are important, as opposed to noise. Which brings me to the debate. Before we can get into that, I want to introduce my two guests tonight. Joseph Buckman, who has a degree, but we won't really, penalize him for that, has been really the heart of the disclosure movement for some time. He was the moderator and key organizer of the 2013 citizen hearing on disclosure. He was one of 7 persons who asked questions of the witnesses after he was invited in as a fill-in for Representative Hooley on the afternoon of the last day of the hearings. And he is a friend of mine. He was the chairman of the Libertarian Party Platform Committee. He has some really interesting perspectives on both mainstream politics and those that kind of go over the edge of the paper. So with no further ado, Joseph, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's great to be here, Richard. Thanks for having me on.
And you've got a Skype thing and a headset and a mic. Great.
All thanks to you.
Well, see, what I'm trying to do with this show is to recreate the idea that we're all in the same room. And if we really wanted to push that to the max, we'd all turn our cameras on so we could all see each other sitting around in our bathrobes and drinking our Miller High Life. But we won't go that far.
I'm here in my libertarian golf shirt, and I'm drinking my vitamin water.
Oh, good. Good for you. My second guest this morning is a journalist. He's also a longtime colleague and friend. He has done a variety of things. He's edited websites, magazines. He's currently editor of Unicus magazine. He has been a correspondent for America Morning News and America's Radio News Network. He is not at the moment in the United States. In fact, we might get into why he's calling in via Skype, or actually I guess I called him, from where he is, which is Hong Kong, literally on the other side of the planet. Now, everybody give a warm hand to Robert Stanley.
Morning, Richard and Joe. Nice to be with you.
And it's like you're just across the desk. This is cool. Art, this experiment seems to be working. So, guys, I'm going to hang back because you're two very interesting guys to talk about this subject. What did you think about the debate? What was your big takeaway?
You first, Joe.
Well, I especially enjoyed the Rand Paul Donald Trump fight. That
didn't seem a bit contrived to you?
Yeah, a little bit. Rand is the libertarian-ish candidate inside the
No wonder you were rooting for him. Okay.
Well, libertarians have a love-hate relationship perhaps with Rand. He's not really a libertarian. He's a Republican. He says he's a Republican. He certainly has some libertarian credentials. His filibuster over the NSA's spying and violation of the Fourth Amendment, we all cheer that on. His other stands are not what the radicals or purists in the party would consider libertarian enough, but then almost no one is. I also watched the little kids debate. I actually thought that was the better debate.
I did too. I'm going to hold my opinion, but I was more fascinated by the kiddie debate than I was the big debate.
Well, great minds think alike here, apparently. No, they're playing with nothing to lose, and so they're just swinging for the backfield wall.
Yep.
And that's a lot more fun to watch than people who are, living in fear of screwing up somehow. And I also was impressed with. There's an echo there. I was also impressed with Huckabee. I thought he exceeded expectations. I thought Trump did not meet the expectations that he might have had going into the debate. And so those are just a few initial reactions.
Okay. Robert?
Yes, I did. I apologize. I didn't watch the debate here from Hong Kong because the hours were off. I did read a summary from Time Magazine of the events.
Okay.
And I thought it was interesting. I really thought it was interesting that there was no real audience there.
You mean for the early show?
No, actually, I think it was for the entire show. Is what I read is that they didn't fill the auditorium.
The early show had nobody in the stadium except for the debate stage in the center.
Okay.
The debate was held in front of a live audience, but there weren't a ton of people in the live audience.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I was getting at. And I'm not sure many people actually did watch it. And you and I were going back and forth about the bigger picture on this, and I just want to cut to the chase. As far as why Trump is popular with the American people is because they find him authentic. Doesn't mean he's correct about everything, but politicians have absolutely broken the trust with the American people, and it really, in my opinion, started with the assassination of JFK, then his brother Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. And the list goes on. Obviously, Watergate. And then Iran-Contra. It's like. I don't know if they can ever repair the relationship.
Don't forget Iraq.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to forget because it's not over. The mission is not accomplished.
No, exactly. We are living in the after effects of those awful decisions 8-9 years ago.
Yeah,
actually, more than that. More than that.
And it doesn't seem like this administration is changing course terribly. From what. It's an industry, okay? I mean, like Eisenhower warned us about, the military-industrial complex is alive and well, and they're obviously dominating certain decisions or policies that are being made to continue the death and destruction at all costs. So,
okay, let's kind of stay within a conventional perspective for a while, and then we'll move into the bigger issues. Either one of you guys, did you kind of give us your summation, Rob?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Which one, either one of you jump in here, which one of the candidates, either at the early show or the big show, do you think really advanced their position?
Go ahead, Joe.
God, this election is more than a year and almost a year and a half away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it matters yet. I think it's a lot of posturing and positioning, and the other thing I wanted to say is we're not really watching people who are actually running for president of the United States. We've got 17 candidates that were on television tonight. Some of them perhaps are running for cabinet positions. Some of them may be running for president in 2020, and they're starting now. Some of them are running to sell books. Some of them are running perhaps for vice president position. So the number of candidates who might actually, out of that 17 set of Republicans that are seriously campaigning with the intention of doing a long-term plugging it out through November of 2016 for president is what, maybe 5, 6, 8 at the most.
That's still a lot.
It's a lot, but we have multiple races going on for multiple positions.
Okay,
and so there were winners among those dimensions. But nobody particularly impressed me. I mentioned earlier, I'm not a fan of Mike Huckabee. I'm not a fan of the evangelical wing of the Republican Party at all. I think that makes for crazy politics. As a libertarian, it offends me to mix religion and politics at that level or to pander in that way.
I think Jefferson had something to say about that.
They all did. And Rand Paul has done some of that, which is what has offended some of the libertarian core. But I thought Huckabee exceeded expectations. He looked in the big kids debate. He was the only one in my perspective who was playing with nothing to lose, and seemed more like the tenor of the 7 candidates in the earlier debate.
Robert?
Okay, so in England, they affectionately call this silly season, and it officially kicked off last night. I find this to be political kabuki theater. There's not a whole lot of substance to this nonsense. I know that these people want to be elected, but there's so many conflicting agendas. And as I was saying before, I don't really think these people represent the will of the people. And even if they did, under the current system that has been established in Washington, D.C., none of these people as individuals are going to go in there and suddenly be able to represent the will of the people, and that would include Donald Trump. I don't see him doing it, although he talks a very good talk and it makes people feel good. I just don't see how he's going to pull it off.
Okay, but not absolutely, bona fide perspective, because there is such cynicism about the process. It's like we've forgotten that individuals in previous history have made a huge difference. It's Margaret Mead, who I work with. It only takes one person to create a revolution, because it's the only thing that ever has created revolutions, is people's attitudes and people reaching out and actually doing something. So to me, I'm so fascinated by the process, because the process itself is so broken, that I think that's what's given a window for a Trump phenomenon. Because as I said at the opening of the show, I find it reprehensible that a television network is dictating to the American people who they get to see, who they get to see in prime time, who they get to see with who they get to see. In other words, the political process itself is now so nakedly, obviously about media and big media and people who know how to manipulate and play in big media. And who does that describe?
Well, in terms of not being able to see people in a debate, the real crime of the last 30 years has been the Commission on Presidential Debates, which replaced the League of Women Voters with Republicans and Democrats.
Can you kind of go into that? Because that's a really extraordinary moment that most people are totally unaware of.
So there's two lawsuits going on right now. One's been filed by a group that's made up of the former Americans Elect Party. I don't know if you remember, but Americans Elect was an organization that said they were going to create a third-party candidate on the Internet. They would have their convention on the Internet. Mm-hmm. They would have a Republican or Democrat for president and then a member of the other party for vice president, as if there's only two parties. Which, I write for independentpoliticalreport.com, which is a website that covers the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, the Constitution Party, the Justice Party, and then there's a slew of other parties. I think right now, in terms of people who filed federal paperwork, by the way, to run for president of the United States, there's around 400 candidates.
Something like that, yes.
Most of those are people who are just doing it, on a lark. You can get on the ballot in a handful of states without it costing a fortune. And then there's other states like Oklahoma where it'll cost you several $100,000 to get on their ballot. Every state has their own ballot access rules, which is nuts. Anyhow, you may recall that we had the Kennedy-Nixon debates, and then we didn't have any debates until we got to Carter-Ford. And those were sponsored by the League of Women Voters. And when Ross Perot got into the debate with George W. Bush and Bill Clinton, the Republican and Democrat parties were pretty upset about that, and they wanted to be sure they didn't face the chaos of a third-party candidate again, so they created the commission, the Bipartisan Commission on Presidential Debates. The League of Women Voters called it a fraud on the American people. Walter Cronkite had some things to say about it at the time. As well, people in the media called it a fraud, and yet that's what we've gotten. So we haven't had a third-party candidate in a presidential debate in the United States of America, in a major presidential debate, let me say, in a presidential debate with the Republican and Democrat candidate since Ross Perot, and that's because of this collusion of the Republican and Democrat parties controlling the Commission on Presidential Debates. So
how do they actually exclude a third party?
Well, by changing the rules of the game. So, they in the last presidential election cycle, they said in order to get into the debate, you had to be polling at an average of 15% in 3 national polls, which, by the way, is the same process that Fox News has used, except for they got 17 people in this pseudo-debate. I mean, a debate is where the individuals can ask each other questions. That's a debate. These are staged press conferences that are called debates. It's not a debate. If it was a debate, the candidates would be challenging each other like Lincoln Douglas, right? That was a debate. We haven't, and Kennedy-Nixon wasn't really a debate. It was also controlled by the media at the time. But at any rate, the Commission on Presidential Debates is particularly egregious. And
but wait. I'm kind of confused because the commission had nothing to do with Fox's debate tonight.
No, nothing at all. But I'm saying Fox followed the rules of the Commission on Presidential Debates, basically in terms of how they take an average.
No, they didn't. They changed the averages so that they got Kasich in. He squeaked in with, what was it, the Quinnipiac poll, where he was ahead enough that they could justify putting him at the adult table and relegating Perry to the kids' table.
Right.
So the game has been rigged from the get-go. My point was, we're no longer even at a governmental commission. We're at the behest of what? One guy.
Well, and it's not a governmental commission. This is made up of representatives of the Democrat and Republican parties. This isn't
Yeah, but they abrogated their entire process. I mean, the Republicans just said to Fox, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And now we're so transparent that it's big media presenting and controlling, a la Citizens United, our election to the American people.
And what I'm saying is, coming into 2016, for the major debates that will occur about a year from now, year and a month from now, whatever, after the Republican nominating convention, so a year and a couple of months, is will we have just the Republican and Democrat, or will we have presidential candidates who are on the ballot in enough states to have a theoretical chance at least of winning the Electoral College? That would be a relatively fair standard. That's what's being argued in both of these lawsuits, that if you're on the ballot in enough states that you could win 270 electoral votes, you ought to be in the debate. And what happened in 2012 that was particularly horrible is the commission said to the presidential candidates, you got to be polling at 15% in an average of these private polls, and they weren't even asking the polling questions using the names of the third-party candidates. They didn't even have them in the poll, which is absolutely ridiculous, and it's restraint of trade or unfair business practice or whatever argument you want to make. So at least Fox managed to get 17 people on TV tonight, as opposed to 2.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I think the earlier debate was more, because it was more in keeping with the freewheeling. I mean, there were some elements that were freewheeling in the major debate. You know, the Trump Paul thing.
That was about it.
But that was about it, and it was really an obvious effort to me on the part of Rand Paul to become relevant, to do something that would get him in the headlines. And I think Fox, scooped themselves by asking Trump the question at the top. And see, Trump was so obviously honest. He said it in his answer, and Megyn Kelly didn't notice or didn't want to notice. He said leverage. In other words, to the unaffiliated, non-political party person, the people that you're trying to convince, those in the middle, what they call the independents, the idea that Trump is so unattached to anything except an agenda or his policy positions or his effort to win, and is not going to be beholden to the elites of the Republican Party, I think is what he was trying to communicate, and judging by the reaction in the room, it seemed to have worked.
Yeah, but there wasn't hardly any people there. That's what when I was trying to get at before. Why were anybody booing Donald Trump?
Why would they be?
Why were they? According to what I read, he was being booed when he came out. Oh, who's doing that?
Well, I didn't hear it when he came out. I only heard it during some of the responses, because it kind of really got kind of thick and fast there.
Okay. But I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me, because considering how high his poll numbers are, allegedly, for even a small handful of people in the
but if you have if you had followers or constituents of other candidates.
Yes. Sure.
You have family members of the other.
Yeah,
candidates.
Exactly. So.
Oh God.
Okay, guys, look. Let me stop you there, because we have to cut for a break. When we come back, we're going to get into some of the farther out things behind all this that I think we ought to talk about, because this is one of those American institutions that a lot of people hold as sacred, and I think tonight on television they may be getting the idea that it's a little less than that.
The passion our great country was built on. Black and white, yellow and brown, a nation under God. White, the purity of love, like a bride and a groom. We'll always stand united, we will not be divided. There's too much to lose. Blue are the waters surrounding the brave patriots from sea to shining sea.
And we are back on the other side of midnight with my two guests, Joe Buckman and Robert Stanley, and we are discussing the great Republican debates, parentheses, S, close parentheses. I want to Go ahead.
That would have been the Lincoln-Douglas debate if you're going to talk about the great Republican debates.
I'm
that
talking
was
about
Lincoln-Douglas.
Well, okay. If you want to go back 150 years.
I do. I wish we could.
But you wouldn't have Skype. So, you got to make your choice. Let's move this conversation a little kind of sideways. I have been looking big picture at the candidates, and I've noticed that we've got several interesting women on the Democratic side who either are in the process of running, Hillary, of course, or could run. Elizabeth, Senator
Warren.
from Minnesota. Who was that?
Elizabeth Warren. I thought she was from Massachusetts.
She is. Yeah, okay. I deliberately did not use her last name, but that's all right. You can add to the conversation.
Okay.
But on the Republican side, there was this dearth, and then this very interesting individual named Carly Fiorina, who was the former chairman, or I guess president of Hewlett-Packard, a woman in technology, a woman very confident in her persona and in her presentations and in her worldview. I thought she did a really good job of introducing herself to the country tonight, regardless of the fact that she was on what they call the undercard on the early debate. Because we live now in a medium where, and that was the point I was trying to make earlier about our show, you don't have to listen live. We are in this asynchronous universe where even if those guys and gals were relegated to the kids' table because of social media and YouTube and 24/7 coverage, it was essentially as good as being on the main stage, and the things that she said really kind of stood out. I mean, poor Rick Santorum, he's just kind of melded into the background. And I don't even know what to say about Lindsey Graham. But Fiorina, and let me tell you, let me make what we might term a fearless hyperdimensional prediction. Remember, this is how I won the bet with Coast and George on doing Coast, which of course dissolved politically because of corporate activities.
I think you only win the bet if the other side actually pays off.
Well, but no, you win it theoretically. I mean, the fact that I can't collect
exactly.
Yeah, and see, to me, it was more important that the process worked, and the process was looking at this culturally, looking at the consciousness impact of this changing physics that I have been talking about and monitoring and going to ancient sacred sites and actually measuring. I mean, we were able to measure changes in consciousness at Chichen Itza. It's not a far leap to think that maybe the larger background changes in this physics as we have progressed over the last couple of decades could have an impact on political consciousness. And from time to time when I did Coast, I would point out to George that politicians and even people on television and even ordinary people in the street, when they were interviewed or speaking, they had this sudden tendency to kind of blurt out the truth. And I call this the Jim Carrey effect, after Jim Carrey in that famous movie Liar, Liar, where for 24 hours he was under some kind of spell, I guess. He could only tell the truth. Can you imagine a lawyer only telling the truth? Anyway,
a politician.
Well, exactly. So we're watching these people kind of blurting out stuff that, the cliche is in Washington, a gaffe is when a politician tells you the truth. Well, it's happening more and more and more. And I've been charting this trend curve, and that was part of what went into the projection that Obama, despite his low standing in the polls and despite everybody being against him and despite him being someone who normally would not even be considered as having been seasoned enough to run for the presidency, I projected he was going to win. And yes, he did. So that same process now, we've had more years to observe and to do test cases. Will this happen? What issues are there? What are the background things that are swirling around public announcements? So let me make a couple of fearless hyperdimensional projections. I believe firmly, regardless of anything else that occurred in the debate tonight, the reason that we need to watch Carly Fiorina is because the woman, the heir of the woman, the epic of the woman, the cycle, the election of the woman for president is what this is all about. Ultimately, it's all down to that. And the Republicans only have her to offer. So I've been watching and waiting. When's she going to make her move? When are the fates going to align to where her presentation in a gang of guys will stand out as a signal in the noise, and she will begin to make her move as a dark horse, either as the candidate on the Republican side, which would be stunning, or more likely as a vice presidential choice of one of the other guys.
I could see that. Hey, Richard, the thing about her that's appealing to people, not only is she very articulate, but she's not a politician.
Exactly.
She's a business person. And people, as I was telling you earlier, people have had enough of politicians lying to them and making false promises and just pissing people off.
Well, if you watch CNN or Fox or MSNBC or any of the RT, the Russians, it's obvious Washington is broken. Broken. Nothing of substance has happened. I mean, we had Republicans create the most powerful nation in the world under the Eisenhower administration, the golden age of the American century, when we built highways and we, rebuilt cities and we created incredible transportation networks and we became the center of commerce, and we did all these things under Republicans who looked at the welfare of the country light years beyond their own personal political objectives. And the only guy that's outside the system that comes from that perspective, doing stuff, building stuff, creating stuff, real stuff in the real world, and the only woman who comes from that same milieu, only in a 21st century way, because her stuff is information and technology and computers and interconnectivity and information flowing on a global scale. The only two people that come from outside that are saying similar things are Donald Trump and Carly Fiorina. And when Donald Trump first came out, when he made his announcement, she was the only one to say positive things about him. And I think, ultimately, as this process moves at warp 9 in directions nobody in the mainstream is capable of predicting because they don't have the right model. They know something is weird, something's wrong, something's amazing, something is transformative going on before their eyes, but they haven't a clue as to what's fueling it or why it will continue. It doesn't matter tonight what Trump said or did. He is the standard bearer for those who feel they have been really screwed over by the system, and they want to make a major statement, and they want a champion. They want someone who will be a strong man on their side. And that's where I think things could get really dangerous, because strong men tend not to perform well in democratic societies.
You mean like you expect him to become a benevolent dictator?
Well, no. I'm just saying if you have a very strong personality, look what FDR did during World War II.
Yeah.
All right. You were able to basically mold public opinion and congressional opinion around your point of view. Well, Trump has several political ideas that I think are anathema to American progress or making America great again, but that doesn't mean that the constituency he's appealing to and those that are going to be added, because Americans love a winner and he looks like a winner and success begets success. It's called, remember what George Bush Sr. called it, the big momentum. Mm-hmm. Well, Trump got momentum out of tonight, and so, in my opinion, did Carly Fiorina.
Well, I agree.
Joe, you've been quiet.
Carly was identified by George Will and the other analysts on Fox as the clear winner of the underlings debate. And
how many different names can we come up for that thing?
They spoke
I like the
about
underlings.
The underlings. They spoke about her as performing at a level that would see her in perhaps the next debate or later debates making it to the big kids' table. And as I mentioned earlier, there were people who were running for the vice presidential slot or for a cabinet secretary position. I think that's where she is. And out of the 17, there's only a handful. And I think it's around 5 or so that are serious contenders for the Republican presidential nomination.
Okay, do you want to go down the list?
Yeah. No.
Why not? I would.
Because it's so late, I'm having a hard time remembering the list. There's 17.
Anyhow, I think but your 5 top can't be, come on, the 5 top.
Well, okay, we'll get there in a minute, but first let's do some.
You can write them down.
Setting. I'll work on it. Some more stage setting. So if I heard you, Richard Hoagland, who successfully predicted and won the bet with George Norrie, who then welched on it, of hosting a show because you accurately predicted Obama as President of the United States 18 months in advance of his election, if I remember right, something like that. Are you now predicting a Donald Trump Fienorini ticket that wins in the general election of November 2016? Is that what you just said?
I didn't say it would win, but I'm thinking because, again, of the symbolic necessity in this election cycle to have a strong, dominant female presence on both sides.
Yeah.
I'm saying that a Trump-Fiorina match is not inconceivable.
You think?
Hey, by the way, guys.
Yeah.
By the way, having worked in the corporate world, my wife works in Fortune 500 corporation, and this is a trend that's going just gangbusters in the corporate world as well. And the upper management, they want more women in upper management, including CEOs like Fiorina. So I expect there's going to be a huge push for her to be like a. This is not the right thing, but like a poster boy, the model.
No, that's not the right thing.
No, that's not because she's obviously not a guy, but that's what we used to call it.
You could say poster child.
Poster child? Okay. Well, she's obviously way too much of an adult for that either. Anyway, she's going to be held up as an example of what women leaders need to be like, and as opposed to mealy-mouthed politicians who obviously overpromise and underdeliver, to put it politely.
See, again, it's that outside perspective. It's like everybody's acknowledging, both those who are in the political process and those who are participating because they're voters, that the system is broken. And the mainstream doesn't know how it can be fixed, obviously. If they did, they probably would have worked on fixing it. But the voters are now in revolt. I mean, Art said the other night that it's at the level of pitchforks and candles and torches and that kind of thing. And their only way they can express their total disgust with the trend curve of things as usual is this billionaire who suddenly pops up as their champion. And then there's this woman executive who says nice things about Trump when everybody else is dumping on him, and I'm looking at that and I'm saying, because on the Democratic side, everybody is assuming that it's going to be Hillary. You want to hear another fearless hyperdimensional prediction, guys?
It's not going to be Hillary.
It's not going to be Hillary.
That doesn't surprise me, but
not
tell
at all.
us why.
But it will be a woman.
Okay, is that why you didn't want to mention her name before, or what?
No. I mean, Elizabeth Warren obviously is one of the possibilities, but she has really, really made it clear that she does not want to be involved. So let's take her at her word for the moment.
Yeah.
Are there other strong Democratic leaders who could step in if Hillary falters to keep the symbolic equality that I'm looking at in place?
You know, you make a point here. I'm starting to think you're right, because that's maybe why they pushed the Democratic debates out another 10 weeks.
Yeah, to October.
Because they're looking for that person that you're talking about.
No, they're not looking. They know that Hillary is going to implode. Yeah. It's almost like she has been programmed to who in their right mind would set up a private email State Department server? I mean, that is just so... The more I think of it, the more nuts it is, unless it's the elegant way of ultimately bowing out.
And how private is it? I think somebody in the Republican debate tonight, and I forget which candidate it was, says the Chinese have all of Hillary's emails. The NSA has all of Hillary's emails.
I was going to say, didn't
the Israelis have a copy of her server.
Didn't Edward Snowden take a thumb drive with him?
You would think that this is out there somewhere and available and eventually going to come back to haunt her. The idea that you could even have a private server that somehow would be secure and really private in the world of international spy games is crazy beyond imagining.
See, when I see, and I have a friend in Washington who I'm hoping to get on the air at some point, Chris Knowles. Chris, if you're listening, I'm pressuring you, come on the air. And what Knowles says, Knowles' first law, is something like this. Whenever you see a big symbolic or political kerfuffle, look for the real symbolic or substantive issues behind it. Why would you think, Joe, you're absolutely right, why would she have thought she could possibly get away with putting all the United States government, State Department business on a private server set up by campaign volunteers in a garage in Chappaqua?
So she's not that stupid.
No.
Really
and she's surrounded by brilliant, people who freely give advice. After the 2008 election, where Obama won it in part because of an incredible, active, deep internet web effort, all the campaigns had to learn how to use the web. You don't think Hillary Clinton in 8 years could have figured out, if she's looking to run for president, how to use the web, how to use it to her advantage, how not to create a story that is so awful when you begin to really think about the implications, and that everybody who's anybody on the planet could have dipped in and read everything that was going on a private server. So ultimately, no matter what knocks her off, I don't think Hillary is going to be the candidate, but I do think it's going to be a woman, not necessarily Elizabeth Warren. So, on that note, I can't be any more specific except to say that the same mechanism that got me to the point where I really thought Obama had a shot is now in operation, and we'll just see, science is nothing if it's not prediction. And obviously, as we get closer, we may actually even get clues who this other Democratic woman candidate might be. I will say one thing. I think that as much as I love what he's doing and how emblematic it is of the polarization on the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders is burning up the highway with doing what everybody thinks in the mainstream again is impossible. That represents in this model the polar opposite of what the Trump effect represents. I mean, literally, we got an avowed socialist running for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States, and nobody is saying, either on the Democratic side or even very loudly on the Republican side, oh my God, Bernie Sanders is a socialist. So what's going on in terms of perception that allows us to have these two polarities running like two railroad tracks out across the continent, side by side, towards some unknown future?
I think the question to ask here is, what was the purpose of this private email server? She's not that stupid. By the way, it was Scott Walker who said China and Russia probably know more about Hillary's emails than Congress. Mm-hmm. What a great line tonight. But it was Bob Woodward back in March who was saying that Russia and China have Hillary's emails. So, Richard, it almost reminds me, I remember in the Clinton administration, the Bill Clinton administration, we had some rocket with our private encryption hardware on there that I believe was recovered by the Chinese after it crashed. Is this a purposeful thing that was done? Because I don't believe that Hillary and her people were so stupid to think that they could really have a private email server in her garage that wouldn't be copied by the Israelis, the Chinese, and the Russians. And, by the way, the NSA. I live within walking distance of this giant center here that consumes, I think, 5 million gallons of water a day to cool the computers.
Oh, my God, that's right. You are there.
That's just down the hill from me. So what?
So why don't you try to listen in?
They know that.
Joe, why don't you try listening in on their Wi-Fi and see what you hear?
I want to live a little longer.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure, well, at any rate, I'm sure they're listening in now and they're copying everything, and they have been for years. They want to.
Yeah, all right, look. Let us all agree that what Hillary did with that email is so incomprehensibly illogical to think you could, A, manage it safely, B, get away with it, have nobody basically call you.
I'm saying all of that's crazy.
Yes.
So she must have had a purpose in doing it. She wouldn't believe that it could have been kept private. So what was the real purpose here?
Well, the ostensible purpose is that she had communications on subjects and with people she didn't want anybody to know about. Okay, but the way she went about protecting, wouldn't it have been easier to have everything in a government server and then have 4 levels of encryption so that only a deep, deep, deep code could get to her secret emails on the State Department server, etc.? Wouldn't that make sense? Because it would have been, one of the rationales for building all the weird conduits inside the pyramids, which I don't agree with, but it's the mainstream logic, is that by building all those passages and false doors and ending tunnels, you basically confuse the heck out of the tomb robbers as to where the good stuff actually was hidden. If she had simply kept everything on a government server and buried it under encryption, nobody would ever have known anything.
It wouldn't have been an illegal act.
Exactly.
This is illegal.
Well, yeah, ultimately it probably is illegal, although that's going to be debated, I'm sure, all the way up to the Supreme Court. The fact that the FBI tonight is looking at this situation, and I believe they communicated to the Clinton campaign that, remember when it came out that she had destroyed the server and she destroyed something like 30,000 emails? It turns out now that there's a thumb drive with everything on it, and the FBI has officially informed her that she is responsible for the preservation of the data on that thumb drive pending the further investigation. So this is not kidding. This is not trivial. This is
a woman who served as an attorney in the Watergate hearings.
Well, yeah, and then went through the whole Rose Law Firm thing, and then Whitewater, and
Nixon was doing the same stuff with the tapes.
Yep. So there's got to be a meta reason.
Yes.
What is the reason?
I thought you would have the answer.
Oh, come on, guys! I'm not the only one here at the table.
Just give me an answer, Richard, because I feel like you're playing with us.
No, I'm not.
Okay, so really, you don't know?
No, I don't know. Look.
Okay,
I don't know a lot of things. I have scenarios, I have models, I have projections. Part of this game, when you leave physics or planetary science, and you get into culture, you get into political things, you can make a prediction on the air, and the day after, it won't come true because the folks that are listening to you deliberately don't want you to appear to have figured out what they're doing, so they deliberately, do a fake. That's the danger of doing anything like this on the air, certainly on live radio. So all I'm going to say is I don't think it's going to be Hillary. I do think it's going to be a woman. I think it's going to be a predominant woman on both sides, and I think it's going to be the Trump-Fiorina matchup. That's really going out there because that assumes Trump is not going to self-destruct. And if he did self-destruct, then her outspoken, similar brashness, similar, I'll tell you exactly what I think, except she's much more sophisticated, that could actually be the replacement for Trump. In other words, he could be John the Baptist ahead of her ultimate, second coming or whatever. It's just too fluid, except I do think we're going to see predominant women, but not Hillary, on both sides of this polarity.
Are you thinking of a senator from Minnesota by the first name of Amy?
Oh, Amy Klobuchar? She's another one, yeah. It could be her. She's really interesting. She was elected in a very unusual, tumultuous period. The governor of the state had just died, and she basically ran and she won. She's a little more conventional than other women that I can think of. But I just think that if we're going to be fair with the audience, we need to lay out our cards, and my cards say that the physics at a higher level is impending the trend curve of consciousness, which is forcing more truth from more people under more bizarre circumstances, and that's the ultimate explanation for why this year, coming off Obama's election, which we thought was amazing, this year, this cycle is going to be even more amazing, and in fact it could be transformative depending upon who the ultimate players turn out to be.
Well, it's the Republicans' turn if you follow the trends, right? The cycle.
Yep. So
I guess the rumor had it that Jeb Bush was supposed to be the anointed one.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're describing, I do agree with, that people are just fed up. And more importantly, the consciousness is shifting towards a higher level instead of being dumbed down despite all the efforts of the media.
That's part of the physics, the changing, increasing consciousness. I mean, look at all the people who desperately hoped that Obama would be it. And look at the incredible the one thing that Obama's going to do that I think is going to save his presidency and save his administration and his place in history. Mm-hmm. He is desperately trying not to allow the apocalypse folks to get us into World War III. That's
are you talking about the Iran deal?
Yeah, of course. The Iran thing is all about those who are following an Armageddon script versus those who are trying to keep us out of the Armageddon script. And that's why his statement yesterday was so clear and so polarizing and so off-putting to Republicans, because basically, I believe, he was calling them out in public that he knows what their hidden agendas are, because it's not just simple left-right politics. There is a group, a concerted effort to get us into a final cataclysmic nuclear war, and he's trying to do within the mainstream process everything he can to keep that from happening. At least that's my analysis based on the same physics that allowed me to predict he would be in that position to begin with.
Okay. It's worth considering. I hope you're right.
Joe?
I'm just thinking you're at the top of the hour break, and I shouldn't say anything too important.
Well, you can tease. We have about a minute 30. You can tease.
A minute 30. I'll tell you what. I think in my lifetime I will see another Clinton as president.
Oh no!
And
wait, you will or you won't?
I think we will.
You will.
And I think that the Clinton I'll see as president won't be in this cycle, but I would watch Chelsea in terms of women in line to be president.
Oh my God, that is an interesting tease.
I think Bill and Hillary are dedicating their life to creating that future for their daughter.
Well, I'm sure Webster Hubbell would be very happy to hear that, considering that he's the real father.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I'd forgotten that one.
Now, wait. That's an assertion. Do we have evidence of that?
The photographic evidence looks very compelling to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't even mention it. And besides that, there was, Hillary was working very closely with Hubbell at the Rose Law Firm for many years while Bill was out chasing every skirt that he saw.
Okay.
Right. I mean, it's a marriage.
No, I'm not saying that that's an implausible idea. I just would like to know that, because I'd never actually seen that model, put out there.
I'll send you the pictures later. You look for yourself. I mean, it's obvious to me.
Hey, come on! People have judged that David Wilcock is the reincarnation of what's his name? Oh, the famous sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce. Yes. So don't go totally on photographic evidence.
I don't know how you segue to that, but okay.
And on that note, we shall return to the other side of midnight after these short messages. And we are back on the other side of midnight. Joe, you were going to regale us with your fleshing out of the tease before the break.
Well, of having a Chelsea Clinton as a president. Mm-hmm. I was just throwing that out there to strike fear into the hearts of the late night radio audience. that's what we do.
Joe.
Yeah,
as I remember, she didn't do too well at NBC, did she?
No.
Well, they had her on the Today Show and whatever. But, we'll see. I mean, it depends on what she does over the next 4 or 8 years. Is she going to run for, Congress or whatever? The other thing I think we might see, if Hillary doesn't get the Democratic presidential nomination or if she drops out of this race at some point.
Well, hang on a sec. Hang on. Are you aware of the polls in New Hampshire?
Tell me about the polls in New Hampshire.
Bernie
Sanders.
She's at 42.
Yeah.
Bernie is at 36. And the margin of error is 5.9. So they are statistically tied in a dead heat for the presidential nomination vote in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And this is a year and a half ahead of the vote. And Bernie hasn't begun his campaign because it's being fueled by real grassroots energy and dynamism, and the crowds he's drawing. Again, it's the polar opposite of the Trump effect, but it's on the Democratic side, and it's completely upending the plans for coronation, which I'm questioning really if there ever really was a plan for Hillary to be president, because the server thing is such a huge deal if you understand it.
I was just going to throw in another possibility, which was if she doesn't get that nomination or if she drops out, or whatever, or perhaps as a method for the powers that control these things, that look at the executive branch and our Congress as the illusion behind which they hide their real control of what's going on, is a Supreme Court nomination for Hillary Clinton before the end of the Obama administration.
Oh, now that is fascinating. That is that, and if who was it? Do they talk about not wanting to retire, but they're looking at her seriously?
Well, Ginsburg's sick.
Yeah, and Hillary would be the perfect. In other words, what you're suggesting is this is all an orchestrated political payoff to put her on the Supreme Court, which is a lifetime position.
It's a possibility. I don't know. I don't see these things as clearly as you do. I never win any bets. And here's the thing. This is silly season. This is all just ridiculous. It's fun radio. It's fun to talk about. It made for good TV tonight, I think, at least for the Republicans. But we're so far away, and there's so much in play.
But wait a minute. What's at stake is the future of the Republic.
It is, but that future is around what happens in the voting booth in November, which is, we can talk about the subtleties of the election, but when people walk into the voting booth in America, they're left with a two-party system, thanks mostly to the Electoral College setup that we have, and they vote based on their fear. And all of the ideology and all the values and all the political philosophy go out the window, and it's the lesser of two evils that gets voted for. And that's what ultimately this will boil down to. So most of what we're talking about is just going to evaporate as steam long before that moment. And I vote libertarian. I believe in voting my conscience, and I live in Utah, where we already know the electoral votes for Utah will go to the Republican, whoever it is, even if it's Dick Cheney or something crazy. Utah, that electoral vote is gone. So I feel free here to vote my conscience without fear that I'm going to throw the election to the greater of the two evils that are the two main candidates. And that's the reality of presidential elections in the United States, is in that moment, in the voting booth, in November. By the way, if you believe that the spinning dials on the voting machines have anything to do with the reality of how people are voting, I have friends who believe this is all a rigged game to begin with. But in that moment of voting, people in America vote based on their fear of causing the greater of the two evils to get elected. If you live in a state where the Electoral College is already set, and there's not a state where it's more set than Utah, really, then you can feel free to vote your conscience. But I would encourage people to vote your conscience anyway. You send a much more powerful message. If you're concerned about the environment, vote green. If you're concerned about the Constitution, whatever, vote Constitution Party. I vote libertarian because I believe in individual liberty is the key to the future of the planet. And that sends a loud message to whoever wins when they see, some momentum going to these minor parties in America. But that's why I say it's all silly season, because in the end, there will be a Republican, there will be a Democrat. People will go in and they're going to vote mostly based on fear.
Hey, you brought up a good point. Catchphrase, everybody's familiar with the lesser of two evils. And honestly, in my second book, Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C., I had to come to grips with the fact that there is something inherently evil about Washington, D.C. in general.
Oh, wait, back off. What do you mean inherently evil?
That the entire complex was set up with a Luciferian or satanic bent to it.
You really believe that?
Well, you didn't read my second book. I'm not I'm not trying to sell you on an idea, Richard, but that as I did the analysis over a period of years of the history of the city,
right,
from its inception to now, or specifically that book was up to 2011. There is definitely an air of evil as we know it that is the undercurrent. And look, I didn't make this up, by the way. It's just what I found. In fact, I actually wasn't going to publish that conclusion at all because I didn't want to become a target. But I felt it would be wrong not to share that information with people that are interested in it. And again, I just pulled it right out of the public record. Richard, have you ever heard the phrase Beltway fever?
Oh, sure.
Okay, well, it has been proven time and again statistically that people from outside Washington, D.C., the Beltway, when they go inside that magic circle, they are affected to the point where even though they go in with the best of intentions, they are corrupted and turned at some point, whether it be by I know it sounds crazy.
Well,
but,
all right, let me talk about some real stuff here because this is intriguing because I've got counterfactual data to your scenario, to your model. When I started looking at the whole hyperdimensional torsion field model, one of the things that I was really, really intrigued with was the impact of certain sacred sites on a global grid in terms of their energy manifestation, kind of like an amplification of the background torsion field. And that's what Robin and I have done. We've gone around the world, and with a lot of help from a lot of people, we've been able to measure some of these ancient sacred sites, and there is an absolute, unequivocal energy manipulation of mass in the vicinity of these sites. So you can demonstrate there are physical effects. Well, at Chichen Itza, as I said, at the top of the show, I was able to actually measure a consciousness component by having people direct their attention at the Accutron, and then there was a mass consciousness ceremony going on, and the guards came by, the national police, and broke it up because they didn't have the right permits, and you could see the incredible plunge of the Accutron frequency exactly as the crowd that had been meditating a few moments before was told that they had to disperse and go away, and you could see it on the graph crystal clear. There was a correlation because I was making the measurements from this huge background solid-state amplifier called the Kukulkan Pyramid. Okay, so we go to Washington, and what we find in Washington is the most extraordinary non-sacred site repeating sacred geometry made out of limestone, assembled in one place, almost surpassing any other such architecture anywhere else on the planet at 39 degrees north latitude, which is twice 19.5. There is actual scientific proof that something about the architecture, the sacred, redundant, repeating architecture inside the Beltway of classical Washington, D.C., from the founding of the country through the building of the White House and the Capitol and all the other buildings and all the other monuments and all the other emblems of symbolic power, like the Washington Monument.
The Washington Monument, which represents a pyramid.
Yeah, of course. It's a long, big obelisk. It's a tall, skinny pyramid. And that shape in the physics is crucial. The point is that I can demonstrate two things that tells me that this architecture on the Earth at Washington's latitude, 39 degrees, has a measurable effect on the field. Two studies. One is, did you know that in the United States of America, which includes Alaska and Canada, Hawaii, the statistics for cancer remissions is highest in two locations in the United States. One is Hawaii, 19.5. The other is Washington, D.C. Now, Washington, D.C. is on the East Coast. It's in a industrial, downwind situation from like Jersey and the refineries and all that goes on in Virginia and in rural Maryland and all that. And yet the statistics say that people being affected by carcinogens in their environment, in the water, in the air, whatever, are at a lower pace and a lower rate in D.C. than any other place in the United States other than Hawaii, which is at that key latitude of 19.5. The other data point, which I find really amazing, is that Strom Thurmond lived to become the oldest serving U.S. senator in the history of the United States. I think he retired when he was 95, 97, something like that. Really way up there. He had lived all of his professional life in Washington, D.C. He retires. He goes home. He dies. Almost in that order, that fast. So it is my contention that it is the sacred geometry built in by the Masons, the founders of the United States, that created a bubble, an amplified bubble in the force, a tremor in the force, an amplification of the background torsion field, which has all kinds of effects, which can then be used like any technology, Robert, either for good or for evil. And the sense of someone, whoever is behind this idea that Washington is basically evil, it comes not because of the architecture, but because of the people who are attracted to power who do not have the best interests of the United States at heart.
Strom Thurmond was in until he was 99.
99. I knew he was up there.
Died about 4 months after he retired.
Isn't Google your friend? Now
it is.
You tell me that's not a one-to-one damn correlation.
I also was in South Carolina. I worked for a TV station in Augusta, Georgia, and had a relative who was one of his caretakers at the hospital when he died at the age of 100. I want to throw something else out into the middle of the night that's scary. I already scared people with Chelsea. Did you notice, or did you pay attention to President Obama talking about how he could, if not for that constitutional amendment, probably win a third term?
Yeah, he was on an overseas trip. He was in Africa. I think he was.
And you're talking about
I think he was in Kenya.
Powerful woman replacing Hillary, Michelle Obama.
Now that's really, Joe, that's brilliant. That's the level of metaphysics I want to bring to this discussion, because we are no longer in Kansas. We have been in the Twilight Zone for so many years. We just kind of haven't noticed. It's like the frog in the pot, the old cliche. And the gain is being turned up, and I'm watching every mainstream pundit, because I have a confession to make, folks. I'm kind of like a closet political junkie. And the reason is I've been trying to change this culture by giving evidence and information that, in fact, we're not who we think we are. We're much more extraordinary based on our history, based on what's out there. Someone please mute your mic because you're making noises. And I believe that this physics is an intrinsic part of the fulfillment of this set of predictions, which is that we're at a real break point. We are either going to go up or we're going to go down. And this election in 2016, one of the things that I learned from our measurements at Chichen Itza was that the big date, the big D, the big possible catastrophe, the big possible change, the big possible transition was not in 2012. It's actually in 2016. And for those who might want to see me prove that at some point, I'll be glad to when I can get a full-time producer and I can go back to doing some science and doing some serious writing. So that may be a couple, 3 weeks. But I will demonstrate why 2016 is, in terms of the physics, a crucial determiner of the future. And that's why whoever's nominated and whoever's running and whoever finally makes it as these opposite polarity candidates is really going to have the force behind them to do something really extraordinary. And I think, Joe, you might be right. If Hillary collapses, and remember, Michelle has all the political background that Barack has. She has always said she's not political, but if certain things came true, then it might be that for the good of the country, that kind of canard. And so, yeah, I can see that.
And there's a lot of folks that would love to have a third Obama term, and we would have an Obama in the White House, now, a former First Lady as president.
Which is the mirror of Hillary.
Yes.
That's Very, very interesting. Now, let me give you another possibility. I've been looking quietly at Loretta Lynch. Loretta Lynch, as many may know or not know, is the successor to Eric Holder as Attorney General of the United States. Her candidacy, her nomination by the President for serving as the next Attorney General was held up for, I think, the second longest period in American political history in the last, 50 years? It was unconscionable because they all agreed she was the best candidate. They just did it to stick it to the president. So finally she's elected, and one of the first couple of things, Joe, that she does as soon as she's in the job that are not only incredibly attention-getting, but also substantively important. You don't remember?
Sorry, I was on mute, but I also don't remember.
Okay. Robert, do you remember?
No, I don't. Go ahead.
FIFA. She basically has indicted the agency that runs world soccer, including, potentially the head of it, Blatty, I think his name is. And that was her first major case out of the... She'd been working on this out of New Jersey for years. And that was her first public act as the new Attorney General, which, A, puts her in a publicly responsible anti-crime position, a strong, decisive woman, someone who's not afraid of international power or money or potential influence. In other words, it's building her up to where the public, when if she ever were to declare, they would say, "Oh, she's got that background." Just a thought.
Wow.
So
yes,
you're not making a prediction. 8 years ago, right now, you were predicting. Here's your chance to throw it out there.
Yeah, make no wine before it's time. I think it's time, by the way, to go to phone calls. I have a lot of people desperately wanting to join the conversation. We don't have enough time to do open lines the way we should anyway, for the time being. So I think we ought to enjoy what other people have to think and see if they can add to something to the conversation, or perhaps tell one of us or both of us or all of us that we're totally full of it. So let me see who this is. Hello, you're on the air. Give us your first name, please.
Hey, Richard, it's Scott in San Diego.
Hi, Scott.
Great show. Your guests are Robert and Joe, is that right?
That's right.
Okay. The primary, the debate, I didn't watch the kids' table debate or the underlings debate, or as I like to call it, as my great-great-aunt Emma used to take me to the wrestling matches when I was a kid, the preliminary belt debate. That seemed to be more appropriate. I couldn't watch the first one, but I did manage to make it through the big boys debate. What can I tell you? And I'll try to clean this up for the radio.
That's good.
The 2-hour GOP infomercial concluded, and it was hard to exactly to sum it up. And my initial impression was that it was a myopic cluster orgy.
Okay.
There was.
We know how to translate over here.
Okay. There was absolutely no mention at all of the current and future effects of global climate change.
No, none.
And regardless of how carefully crafted the position statements of the candidates were, if the planet ultimately becomes uninhabitable, all 7 billion of us are essentially screwed. And all of their crowd-pleasing plans and political promises immediately become moot. And that should concern people.
Well, look, this is so early in the process. Tonight's appearance, this 2-hour thing, and if you count the kiddie table, the 3-hour thing, was designed for positioning. It was designed to acquaint the candidates with the American people or vice versa. It was designed to kind of give people a glimmer of insight into their character, what they stand for, why they want to be president, to get into all these other issues. And I agree that climate change is super important, but it's too soon. It won't last in the American consciousness. It's something that's going to wait for down the road when the actual candidates are more firmly cemented in terms of their pecking order or relationship. At least that's my perspective.
But do you honestly think that these folks taking the coke coal money and the oil industry's money and the fracking money and all the other dirty, filthy money are going to utter a single solitary syllable about meaningful topics like climate change and the future of the planet?
See, again, it wasn't the candidates; it was Fox and their questions. Obviously, Murdoch doesn't want to talk about climate change, but the Republican position is climate change is a hoax. The Democratic position is climate change is real. So you have another polarity.
Well, and the thing that got me was the beauty pageant aspect of this whole scenario. The only thing that was missing, and maybe we'll see it as the process unfolds, is a Speedo walk by all the candidates up and down the runway, a talent competition, and then a great pie fight finale, to wrap things up. I mean, that's how absurd the way we handle the picking of leaders is in this country, and it's no wonder we're in the rotten shape that we're in.
Well, look. To be fair, it's kind of like something Joe said a while ago. It's the media version of the military-industrial complex. You have billions, literally billions of dollars changing hands between commercials and pundits and airtime and infomercials and all that around the campaign, around the cycle. Other nations, other countries, I think Britain does what? Maybe a month of campaigning?
Yeah.
But we're
6 weeks, I think.
Yeah, we have turned this into a growth industry, like we privatized prisons and turned them into a growth industry, which means you've got to arrest more people. Oh my gosh, really? There's an equation there? So as long as it's the profit motive at the base of Fox controlling the process, see, that's what I'm waiting for the big, brouhaha over how Fox determined the debate, how they picked winners and losers. Because Republicans are all about not picking winners and losers, right? And what do? They picked winners and losers.
Exactly.
Can I ask, caller, what would your solution to climate change be?
It's Scott. We'll just call you Scott.
Yeah.
Scott.
Well, to the extent that we can get off of fossil fuels, that would help. But I've heard some experts have said that we've already reached the tipping point between the global population and the dependency and the carbon dioxide that we're pumping out day after day, year after year, that it's too late, that anything we did do would essentially be meaningless. It might slow it down, but ultimately, we're going into the old cosmic crapper.
Well, I'm a little more optimistic because I know the potential, for some technologies could radically intervene in the whole global warming scenario, provided enough people got interested and excited and concerned. There are a series of technologies which, if we were to make them public, take them out of the black world, could easily handle this problem. You could mine materials from the asteroids to assemble sun shields, literally giant umbrellas hanging in space between the Earth and the sun. And you could build it so it's thousands of miles across, and it's like a big sunflower, and it's got mylar panels, and you do all this out of materials in space, and you use not rockets to do it, but actual variants of the so-called EM drive that Roger Scheuer has invented in England 15 years ago, and that NASA is now testing. And you can do massive global planetary engineering that would help. The key problem, of course, is that are you going to get the cooperation and the global agreement by all the various parties that would have to agree that that's what you need to do if all else measures fail? Because if you turn off the sun, I guarantee you with a sunshade, with an eclipse, an artificial eclipse, global temperatures will plummet within hours. So you could actually modulate exactly the amount of energy you wanted on the Earth for crops and for agriculture and for living and the whole fauna flora ecosystem, but you could tweak it down by a few percentage points by simply putting slots in your sun shield so that you could modulate the global warming efforts, which have a long lag time. It's like, for instance, when you're dealing with heat, the peak heat of summer is not in June when the sun is highest in the sky and the solar insolation is greatest. It's actually several months later because the oceans have to warm up, and there's a time lag and a heat lag, and so your hottest days are really, the dog days of August, et cetera, et cetera. So there would be a phase lag of tweaking the temperatures using a sun shield, but it would be almost instantaneous, because if you cut off the solar energy, bingo, so you could regulate it almost probably with a computer, probably a program. It would have incredible redundancy because of the scale. You'd have robots building it. You wouldn't be using human beings. It would be nanotechnology. It would transform the economics of the planet, which is what Trump is hinting at, the need to, make America great again by doing great things and building great things. This would be a huge building project that ultimately would benefit everybody on Earth. And the only problem is not technical, it is political. How could we get agreement?
We've already demonstrated on a much smaller scale the idea that you've talked about with one of the early Skylabs.
Exactly.
They put a shield to cool the Skylab down until they could fix the solar panel, as I recall. Yep. And so we already know that on a smaller scale it's been shown to work.
So we're limited not by our technology or by our politics, I think, but by our imagination. And that's why I'm looking at the Trump phenomenon, because he's breaking all the rules. And in a situation where you break all the rules, he who follows different rules can, in fact, succeed. We shall be back to the other side of midnight in a couple of minutes. We are back on the other side of midnight. My guests are Joe Buckman and Robert Stanley, and we've been discussing the great Republican debate of 2015. I know it doesn't compare to Lincoln Douglas, Joe, but anyway. Why don't we take some calls? Because I've got a bunch of people here, and we're not making them happy. So let me take this one. You're on the air.
Yeah, hey, Rich. This is Dana calling from California.
Hi there.
Hey, I wanted to ask you guys, first of all, I really like your guests, Joe and Robert. But, Joe, are you thinking of running for, any kind of politics? Because you seem to make a lot of sense to me.
Well, thank you. I ran for the United States Congress in 2008 as the Libertarian candidate in Utah's 1st District, and I was one of only 2 or 3 Libertarians to actually get to debate their Republican and Democrat opponents. And what I called for was congressional protection of whistleblowers. I think that's the key to reforming what's broken in America. We're talking only tonight on this radio show so far about electing a president and vice president. They don't really run the show.
No.
The show's got the Congress, the Supreme Court, and then the real show has the military-industrial complex or the bureaucrats or whatever's really controlling things behind that. So I think if Congress could pass whistleblower protection and then hold open hearings on waste, fraud, criminal activity, and the extraterrestrial reality of an engagement with people of the planet Earth, we could transform, not only the country but the planet. That's what I ran on. I'd like to do that again, but frankly, I had more blowback inside the Libertarian Party than I did from my Republican and Democrat opponents. Libertarians really don't like to have nutcases running as libertarians because they're so afraid of looking like they're not part of the mainstream.
You mean the Libertarian folks didn't kind of with open arms accept your ET proposals?
The former political director of the Libertarian Party nationally put a post up wearing a tinfoil hat and tried to get the Libertarian National Committee to remove me as a candidate. But other than that, it was fine.
How did they wind up inviting me to come to Denver then?
That was a mystery to me. That was just awesome. You gave me so much cover because I got to say, look, I'm not as nuts as Richard Hoagland. That was just fantastic. I remember the moment I saw that you were giving a keynote speech at the 2008 convention in Denver, and I was just delighted. I wanted to throw a couple of more things out. I've got nightcats.net. Herb Jepko's biographer. Herb was the first national late-night radio talk show host, but we'll do that topic another time. But let me throw a couple other scary things out. What's going on with chemtrails? Are they cooling the planet with chemtrails? What's going on with genetically modified food? Are they reducing sperm counts? Is this a reduction in the population of the planet over time that some control group has implemented on us? And then we talk about this being the age of women, and it's true. Politically, this may be the time for a woman to become president, at least vice president, more women on the Supreme Court, whatever.
Well, hang on. In the model that this physics is impelling the liar effect, did you see what Bush said about women's health the other day? He stepped in it big time by saying that $500 million was spent on women's health was maybe a little too much. And this is against trillions of dollars spent in the economy on health for everybody. And it was Hillary, of course, who rightly jumped on that. But again, you have two effects. One is you've got he could not censor himself in terms of what he really thinks, number one. And number two, he made a woman's issue a big deal again when people weren't really talking about it on the Republican side.
It's like these guys are committing suicide right in front of us between Hillary and her email server and Jeb and these ridiculous comments. But the point I was going to make is universities are now dominated by women. This used to be a male thing. There's this generation of lost young men in America today between the ages of 16 and 25 or so that are more interested in playing video games and virtual reality than actually dating.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And oh my God.
You can see this as a cultural trend.
Well, come on, Joe. It's obvious they didn't have 57 Chevys to date in now, so there's no interest in dating.
No, I'm serious. I think there's a lost generation of men coming, and that this is the age of women, politically, educationally.
Now, see, you arrived at this from a totally different watching of the trend curves, but I think it's the physics. Look, this whole extraordinary resurgence of interest in, homosexuality, in transgenderism, in equality for everybody, regardless, and the warp 9 rate at which this social change has completely overturned not only the body politic, but the Supreme Court just a few days ago. I see that as another manifestation of this equalization of the sexes in the consciousness of the political structure. And that's why I'm saying look to the women, look to dark horses who we're not even talking about now. If it's not Hillary on the Democratic side, it could be somebody really intriguing, and I love the speculation it could be Michelle.
Me too.
Wait a second, guys. Wait a second here. Honestly, Joe, you talking about, it's the generation. I heard this quoted that, people they huddle together in isolation. I'm telling you, this generation is the same thing. Females are doing the exact same thing. Girls are playing games just like guys.
Mm-hmm.
They're huddled together in isolation. I don't know how else to put it together. It's just extraordinary. But Rich, I got to ask you. You touched on a couple of things that were extraordinary. You were talking about cancer emissions at 19.5 degrees.
Yep.
Now that must be also relevant for 19.5 degrees below the equator as well.
Except there you just have an ocean. There's no piece of land, so you have to sit there with a ship.
Well, it cuts through South America. It cuts through Africa.
No, it has to be at a particular longitude as well as latitude.
Now that's news to me.
Okay. Well, it has to do with the rotation dynamics and the dynamics of the outer inner core and all that, but that's why you have these emergences of the energy at one place, focused at one latitude, longitude. At Hawaii is the 19.5 point. Like on Mars, it's Olympus Mons, and on Jupiter, it's the Great Red Spot, etc. So these upwellings are localized in one region. It's not a point, so it's like plus or minus a degree or two, but it's a region where you can, the measurements we got on Hawaii during the eclipse with the Accutron were mind-boggling. Mind-boggling and reproducible. So I got to run around and do some more eclipse studies. But this tells me we're dealing with a physics which, A, is affecting us, and B, that we can affect. And that's what I think is going on. The meta big dynamic behind everything that the mainstream is throwing up their hands and saying, this has never happened before.
Wait, so, Rich, what is this sun shield you're proposing? I mean, how do you propose that nanites are going to construct this? I mean, what's the raw materials they're going to work with?
Well, if you take apart any average asteroid, it's composed primarily of silicates, depending upon where it came from, what part of the exploded planet it was ejected from. So you've got crustal materials, you've got mantle materials, you've got metals. You could actually refine, with the right technology, metals in space. You could vacuum spray metallic films like aluminum on plastic, like Mylar. You can make Mylar. What do you need to make Mylar? You need organic molecules. Well, what is it? The 67P mission of Rosetta has now found that the comet 67P is chock full of organics, tons of organics, megatons, which means if you land on a comet and mine it, you can create plastics, vaporize aluminum on them, create a huge sun shield. All of this was projected by an old friend of mine named Kraft Ericke back in the 1960s. When we got together and I went and hung out with him at Christmas time and visited him there in San Diego and had a great time. He was such a visionary. He wrote a book called The Magnificent Heritage, which was his projection of how humans could literally employ existing 60s technology to inherit the solar system, save the Earth, completely save the environment, transform the energy cycle so that we weren't destroying the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he did it like 50 years ago. All I'm saying is the technology now is mature enough that we could begin to look at these options. So this mania over global warming, that there's nothing we can do, will fall by the wayside when we realize that as part of energizing the entire economy, if we had a space program worthy of the name that did for the 21st century what the Kennedy NASA missions did for the late 20th century, we would not only solve the global warming issue, we'd solve a whole bunch of other issues. And I'm not even talking using exotic, transcendental technologies or physics. I'm talking about simply scaling up what we know how to do.
Are you talking within the orbit of Venus and Mars, or are you talking like within Venus and Mercury?
It would be roughly where the current Discover satellite is.
Yeah.
Did you read the other day where they finally launched the Al Gore satellite, the one that's supposed to kind of park at the Lagrangian point that's 1 million miles from the Earth in the direction of the sun? So you'd be.
Because I was going to say there's some physics in here as far as Bode's law and Lagrange points.
Well,
that,
yeah, all you would do,
be kind of careful about.
But all you would do would put it at that Lagrange point, and it would orbit around, and you would have attitude control mechanisms on it, so you could change the aiming. You could actually change the orbit a little bit. You could replenish it with xenon fuel. You'd use ion thrusters for station keeping. It wouldn't take that much energy to keep the shield in place, and you wouldn't need it there for very long, because once you cool the atmosphere in certain parts of it below a certain point, you get positive feedback effects, so that the trends now for increased CO2 would dramatically change, and you wouldn't have to do this for more than probably 10 or 15 years. So,
hey, Rich, I don't understand this. Why is CO2 is inherently important in the Krebs cycle in biology?
Yeah, but you don't want too much. It's all about.
The main problem is methane. It's not CO2.
This will work for any greenhouse gas.
By the way, there's a wonderful documentary I saw called Cowspiracy, which is about how cattle agriculture and methane is what's causing the problem, not carbon dioxide.
And volcanoes, don't forget.
Yeah.
I'm not forgetting volcanoes. Okay, we're going to go on to our next call. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Rich.
But before you do, Rich, August 21st, 2017 could be a tipping point for North America. That is the first total eclipse to hit North America, I think, since the 70s.
No. Remember, I measured an eclipse right here in Albuquerque in 2012.
Yeah, but that was an annular eclipse, not total.
Yeah, but for the physics, it doesn't matter.
That's for
the physics.
The attention of humanity, totalities.
Yeah, it'll be a big deal. Remember, I also covered I covered one for CBS by borrowing an Air Force jet and chasing it at 40,000 feet up the East Coast, but we won't get into that.
This one goes across Oregon, right through the heartland of America, out off South Carolina. August 21st, 2017, the American people will be turning their attention heavenward. A lot of people will be traveling toward the path of totality, toward the center line. I'll be one of them. And I think some good stuff could come out of that. August 21st, 2017.
Well, I got to pick the right place to measure the physics, because we were very fortunate that the eclipse track passed right over the Sandias. And I discovered as part of our measurements that the huge, I mean, we're talking millions of tons of 70-million-year-old limestone that form a cap on the Sandias that are outside my window, which I can't see in the dark because it's dark tonight and no moon. But that limestone acted as the amplifier for the torsion field that we were able to measure. I've got to find in the eclipse track, from coast to coast, literally, a place where a similar amplification could be accomplished using a natural landmark. So I've got to look at the track very carefully. But what we might do, that night we might actually do the show from wherever we are in the country and tell you and show you, because this is radio with pictures, what kind of measurements we got from the second eclipse we will have measured in the continental North America.
I'll be wherever you are for that.
Okay.
The point of maximum totality is near Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Cloud cover may be a problem there.
See, that's not maybe the place where you want to be. Like Tom Van Flandern.
Nebraska.
Tom Van Flandern and I, but Nebraska is as flat as Kansas. I don't think there's any torsion field amplifiers in Kansas or Nebraska. But we will look. Why don't we take another call? Okay? You were on the air.
Actually do the show from wherever we are in the country.
Turn down your device, please. Turn your phone down.
Pictures.
Turn your phone.
What kind of measurements we got from the second.
Hurry.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, go. Hello?
For a question?
Yep.
You want me to say my question?
Say your question. You're on the air.
Oh, greetings. I wanted to talk about the Trump and Carly ticket. I don't think that will ever happen because that would set us back 30 years to 1984, Mondale Ferraro. And we learned back then that us women we don't want to settle for vice president anymore. We want a woman president now. It's been 30 years.
You've never had a woman vice president. What are you talking about?
Vice presidential candidate, Mondale Ferraro, 1984.
Yes, I understand, ma'am, but you just spoke as though we've already had a female vice president.
Women have already gone through that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, I think she has a valid point in that there is this obvious symbol, this objective, and women really, really would like to see equality. And just as electing the first black American president represented a certain equality for the racial issues that we've dealt with, so that electing the first woman president will symbolically address the idea of equal pay, of all the other equalities that need to be addressed. And it's interesting to me that on the Republican side, unless Carly Fiorina really makes a major play in the news in the next 48 hours and has poll results which are very impressive and there will lead to more attention, it looks to me like Trump, unless he does something, catastrophic, will be the possible candidate, and he has to pick a running mate. And he's already been photographed saying nice things about Fiorina and vice versa. And I just think they both represent outside the system, and outside the system this year is what is going to win.
Yeah, it's a good fit. Elizabeth Dole was the first Republican female to run for president. It didn't work out, obviously.
But it was the wrong time. See, again, if the model of the physics of changing consciousness is a part of this, then do not discount the idea that its time has come. I mean, when you look at the other social changes we're living through at this incredibly compressed rate, to me it seems to be a valid idea that this could be what tips the balance in this year, which needs to be, if the model is correct, the year of the woman.
Well, then how about Fiorina as president and Trump as vice president?
But Donald would never accept that.
Well, how do you know?
Remember, you're dealing with personalities. Now, if Trump implodes, Fiorina is the female equivalent of the guy outside the system who has many, if not most, of his attributes: major industry, technology, world leaders. She knows a lot of them. There's nothing in the model that says she couldn't be number one. I'm just saying, let's see where it goes in the next few weeks to see if her poll numbers increase to where it could be a number one.
Okay.
So, caller, thank you for calling. Please call back.
I also know the obvious reason why Hillary had her server in the garage.
Which is?
She's a narcissist, and someone talked her into it, and they did it to indict her, and that's exactly what they're doing.
Well, that's an interesting idea.
I have a theory. She doesn't drive, so she's got plenty of room in the garage.
Very funny. Thanks for calling.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's see. Do we have another call? I don't see anybody at the moment. We're getting down to the end of the show, gentlemen. We've got maybe 5 or 6 minutes. What do you want to get to in the last few minutes?
Joe, go first.
This is a ton of fun. It's interesting, and it's largely a waste of time.
So that's why you're up in the middle of the night.
Of course, because that's what I do. And I work for libertarian presidential campaigns, knowing we're not going to get elected, but hoping we inch the planet a little bit toward liberty, a little bit toward seeing ourselves as earthlings as opposed to fighting over nation-state boundaries or whatever crazy stuff we tend to want to do. But, I wonder, this is what I wonder about. I wonder whether the president really has any real authority anymore. I wonder if the former structures of our republic are now just illusory, the smoke and mirrors that hide the real power centers that are running the show. I wonder if those real power centers have a depopulation of the planet as a goal, and perhaps because 7 billion human beings is not sustainable.
Hang on. It's not sustainable with current technological or physics understanding.
Yeah.
It is if we apply the kinds of technologies and physics that I know exist, that I know from the work of people like Paul LaViolette, have been in black programs for the last 50, 60 years. That's what we have to break out of the closet. And I'm going to propose a very interesting experiment tomorrow night. I'm going to have this image, because I'm going to send this to you quietly, Joe, so you can see how paradigm shattering this single image is. And
okay.
I'll do the same thing for you, Robert.
Thank you.
And I'm not going to give you any information about it. I'm just going to send you the image, and I want you to tell me why this is a revolutionary, totally paradigm-changing moment. And then I will post it tomorrow night. And what I'm going to recommend tomorrow night is that as many people as listen to this program and go to the web and look at what we're going to talk about, that we actually send this image and our commentaries to Mr. Trump as an outsider and demand that he actually ask the government, what does this mean? And we can see what happens.
Interesting.
Well, it's those improvements in technology that have gotten us here, for sure. But I do wonder, where the real power is and what the real agenda is that's beyond our elected representatives in Congress or the executive branch.
Are you talking like invisible government?
The shadow government, and that's what I was alluding to.
The Illuminati. Look,
yeah.
I initially kind of looked favorably on some of these conspiracy theories, but the very fact that I've got a show and I can ultimately talk to unlimited numbers of people on any subject I want, inviting anybody on here I want to talk about almost anything I want, is kind of intriguing, because if the system was all controlled, gentlemen, this program or arts program would not exist.
That's an assumption, Richard.
Well, of course it's an assumption. Tell me how it benefits the powers that be to let us present more and more information and gather more and more people. Because remember, ultimately, politically, it only takes 2% to change anything.
I don't think it benefits them, but I don't think they see it as a threat in the moment.
No.
So that's why they didn't want me on Premiere. They moved heaven and earth to kick me off Premiere. I'm such a non-threat.
Well, okay, that's a good point. But Joe, you brought up a very excellent point about this too. The powers that be are very calculating about this, and martyring Richard or blocking him in a very public way would just cause more people to look him up in an alternative format to see what he was talking about. And so the social engineering that they've been engaged in for a long time on this planet is it's staggering.
And it's multi-generational. They have a longer view of things than we do. We're looking at the next election cycle. They're looking at the next generation or two, or what the planet will look like maybe in the year 2090.
Yes. Maybe if they have a long-term vision. Gentlemen, we are coming to the end of the program. Any last words before the music starts and we have to go away?
My last word is... Go ahead.
Well, I just was going to say thanks. I enjoyed it very much, and I'm going to keep listening on to you. And Joe, it's a pleasure meeting you. I think I'm going to have to get in touch with you off the air.
That'd be great. I'd enjoy that. My last message to the listeners here tonight is, life is short and it has a significance, and vote your conscience, vote your values, vote for the candidate who best represents what you really believe in, and get out of this craziness of fear and choosing the lesser of two evils. It doesn't really matter. Right? What matters is if you take a stand based on principle and you live a life that's worthwhile, and based on that, there might be more to it beyond what happens here on planet Earth later. And if you're just choosing the lesser of two evils out of fear, that's a wasted vote.
Gentlemen, I thank you for participating. Obviously, we will have you back. I'm really glad that you guys are going to talk together separately off the air. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, this experiment, I think, has been a pretty interesting one tonight. We will try to do some more of it again in the future. So in the meantime, have the rest of your evening in a pleasant manner, beneficent to all involved, and we'll see you tomorrow morning on the other side of midnight.